our lunch for today. So we don't have a very long day. And that means that we're going to get into it. And I must say that you've been such a lovely audience yesterday, and I'm looking forward to that today. So my name is Jessica Singh, and I'm a research director at the University of the Western Cape. And just for your information, SLEE, we spell my name Jesika. Okay, so those of you interested in names for your children and grandchildren. Okay, so we're going to get started with our program for today, and you all have the program in front of you, I hope. But you would see that our first session was reflections and overview of day one. And towards the end of yesterday, we did do a reflection of day one. I think it's Prof. Ras assisted us with that in terms of day one. And during the course of our day, we were reflecting on various aspects of the, okay, here's another one. It's called Uni-led Collab project. Those of you who are trying to whittle it down yesterday, Uni-led Collab project. So in terms of yesterday, you've engaged quite significantly in terms of how the department works with the project, the administration, the call, the length of the call, the monitoring and evaluation aspect that we would like to see put in place. And very importantly, we're going to look at today the actual the actual content for the next call. So I'm going to engage you on that. So in terms of day one, you've contributed significantly, and whatever you have contributed yesterday is going to be also used in terms of the DHET team with further aspects or iterations of the calls that are going to go out. So basically what we're going to move on to is the open floor engagement. So those of you who had intended to catch a small nap in the morning, our 1 a.m. crew, so that's not going to happen, okay? It actually is a good way of keeping you on your toes. So, so in terms of opening up this particular session, I want to recap for you quickly in terms of the UCDG, the grant itself as a whole, and to just locate this particular sub-program of the grant. So as you're all aware, most of us in the room are very familiar with the UCDP, the institutional grants, because all our universities are busy at work. We have different projects and activities, and as we mentioned yesterday, it's either student-linked or teaching and learning and teaching, research related to the curriculum, etc. So the grant, the principle behind the grant overall is that, right? So that we are able to build capacity across the sector in various different areas, teaching and learning, research, and, improving the curriculum, etc. So I've also heard many of you say yesterday, that came up and spoke, very thought-provoking little presentations that you did that actually causes us all to pause and look at, okay, how is it that we can do better? How is it that we can build more capacity? And how is it that we can look at capacity development in a different light across the sector? So that's the purpose overall of the grant. And then you're familiar with the institutions. Each institution has its own grant. You look at projects, activities, and that are in your context, very relevant to your own context. And the other sub-program that we made reference to yesterday, as well as you would see this morning on the screen, is the national projects. So I think quite a few of you as well that are seated here are involved in the national projects. So I'm not going to list them. I'm going to ask you to list them. Let's start with SLEE. Number one national project. No, not university-led. One, right, NGAP. You're all aware of NGAP? So that falls into that category of sub-programs that are nationally led. So give me more examples. We had a few on the screen. Yes, sir. Sorry? Is that a project there? You see, I'm giving you your 1 or 2 minutes of fame. At the back there, give me an example. Right, FP. Future is F, professors is P. FPP, right? You're all aware of FPP? Yes, Prof. Jabaya?
NESP.
NESP. Can we say it full? Nurturing, emerging scholars program. Yes, anything else? Shout, you can shout.
Entrepreneurship development in higher education.
Affectionately known as EDI, Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education. I'm sure you've been following on the screens all these beautiful events and all these entrepreneurs having a grand old time. So that's also one of the projects. Anything else? Yes, we also came across that in our discussions, HELM project, Higher Education, Leadership and Management. So there are a number of national projects, and we all have opportunities. Our university partners assist the department to actually roll out these. And at our universities, we all have an opportunity to participate in these projects. So let me come to this sub-project, why we are here for the 2 days. And that is the university-led collaborative project, uni-led collab project or sub-program, right? Now, yesterday in Mandisa's, when she engaged us in her session, she gave us a lot of information about the call, how it goes out to whom and how you respond, etc. So basically what happens with this call, we have a university partner who assists in the implementation. In this case, it's the University of Limpopo, and you've seen them actively involved in the program. That's the partner university who implements with the Department of Higher Education and Training. And what happens is that a call goes out annually, and we in the sector, we collaborate with each other. We collaborate universities, industry, other relevant partners on topics of interest for the whole sector, right? So basically, it's not something that you as a researcher or a teacher has a personal pet project in. It's something that's going to make a big difference to the whole sector. So as a result of that, many of you seated in the room, you've had put in your grants, you've had all your partners. So we're not saying that we need to work with every university in the sector. Very often you go between 5 and 10, and you have additional outside African universities, outside the continent, industry partners, etc. So that is the program that we are actually want to have further discussions on today. So the current call just closed now on the 6th of March after it was extended. And in that call, there was a focus, a specific focus, and that focus has been on students living with disabilities, commercialization, teaching and learning. I'm missing out one. But there has been focus areas, and you've had to put in your applications. So very interesting for us is for you to be able to engage now with us and engage in a manner that allows us for the next call and maybe future calls as well to identify these are areas in the sector, or these are issues, these are challenges that face us all that we actually need to plow funds into, to build capacity in these areas so that we can send out a call, the future calls, and you remember we said 3-month period in the future. So to actually get that going now so that when we're ready to send out the call, it's it's quick, it allows you to work with your partners, etc. So that's an introduction. Do you get it? Yes? Okay. So I won't talk much after this, right? So what we're going to do now is, firstly, I'm going to allow you in your groups. I'm going to give you like 5 to 10 minutes, and try to have a discussion in your groups based on what you feel are areas of vital importance, are areas of challenge that we face in South Africa in terms of capacity building in higher education, in terms of our provision. So remember, it's teaching and learning, it's a curriculum, it's research. So don't confine yourselves to just, small niche areas only. Let's think broadly. Let's think of, if we get this right, if we put funding into an area like this, it's going to impact the whole sector. So that's our thinking. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. I said 10. Please discuss that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get feedback from you in terms of what you feel. And it's going to be an open discussion, so we're not going to restrict you as well. We just want to get all your thoughts and feelings and your experiences. And some of you are experts in certain areas, and there's a need in that area. So let's talk like that. Okay, so the floor is open. You have your discussions, and I will get back to you in a few minutes, and then we can start talking. Thank you, everyone. you have to do is put forward what you all have agreed. These are potential topics or areas that we can cover in terms of the next call for the grant. Okay, Levin?
Thank you, Jessica. So we had a broad discussion, but the umbrella that we thought, by the way, I'm Laverne Samuels from Durban University of Technology. We had an overarching umbrella and we described it as transforming academia, including the transformation of the student experience and the transformation of academics to deliver on that transformed experience. So some of the areas that we looked at was student support for student success, professional learning initiatives for staff development, entrepreneurship education, to create work-ready graduates who don't only seek employment but create employment, the integration of ethics and governance for citizenship education, and we term this global citizenship, understanding the local as well as the global needs, internationalization of the curriculum, particularly Africanization of the curriculum, to address broad issues such as Africa Agenda 2063. We often talk about the SDGs and how similar they are to Africa Agenda 2063, but we don't often say that Africa Agenda 2063 preceded the UN SDGs, and we still need to deliver on that. Then to look at new fields of study, which are South African-led, but are not necessarily just for the continent. Yep, I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're done for the day. We can go home now. There's so many areas. I think from walking around, I also found that that's common across the room as well. So let's add on to that in terms of our groups. And if you want to expand on something specific, we can just, the mic is moving around from table to table. So who's next? There's hands up here.
Okay.
Good morning, colleagues.
Oh, sorry, we're having two groups. Ladies first.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning, colleagues. In our group, I would add from that group on issues of curriculum transformation in terms of decolonization. We suggested that we need to emphasize decolonization because it seems like a missing link. And then we added from our group on financial sustainability for third stream income, because we feel like there was commercialization of research in the previous, but it needs to be at a broader level, because once we talk financial sustainability, it can improve our university to be independent and can be sustainable as well. Thank you. And then another one was also on data analytics. We said we need to see issues of data analytics and also articulation. I think someone can add on those 2 points in my group.
So on articulation, we were saying, how do we articulate at program level because institutions do have MOUs and they have some working arrangements on articulation, but the challenge is how do you then articulate at program level, and how do you then transform the curriculum to enable articulation from one sector to the other, like the TVETs, because we see that when you have to look, for example, you have engineering-based programs and some TVET students do something similar, but when they then have to then transition from the TVET sector to the higher education, you find that there are some blockages in the curriculum, in how curriculum design is looking like, and that's why we said articulation is very important. And on data analytics, we are saying the quality of the data that we have as institutions is not where we would like it to be. Some institutions are advanced in terms of the data analytic maturity model, but others are still behind because they're still working with predictive data. Where else like we would like, no, they're still working with descriptive data. Where else we'd like to move to predictive data so that we can plan efficiently, like enrollment efficiency plans and things like that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think this came up as well yesterday in our discussions. Remember the data analytics to make informed decisions. On the articulation issue, I know we have a project on that. Basically, it's important for us in the room, again, our colleagues from DHET, is to put that list out there of the projects that we have funded thus far. And also some are, like want to expand, and they probably had 4 or 5 institutions, and now they want to look at that in greater depth. So that is also, a good starting point to include others into that as well with the articulation. But there is a project out there, so I think the list will really help us. Let's go to the back.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I think the 2 groups have said our mind, so I will be very short. So the summary of what we discussed is that literacies, academic literacies, are the foundation of success. Be it the way one could look at it, and the focus over the years has been on developing academics as university teachers. There hasn't been enough emphasis on giving the same kind of agency on students for them to succeed. So the future course should focus more on student-related agencies for them to really succeed as university learners, if I may put it that way. The second aspect we discussed was also on data analytics, but not really from the systems, but from the people. Information orientation that will drive a culture of data-driven decision-making, environment, where everybody is aware that although some don't believe in this, if you can measure it, you can't really manage it. So that kind of information orientation in the system, by providing capacity and training in our planning offices. If you look at DHET reports on enrollment outcomes, you will see a lot of gap between targets and actuals. And that is actually brought about by a system that is not really data-driven from an information orientation point of view. We have all of these fancy systems, ITS and all of those systems, SPSS, this, that. But those systems are nothing if the orientation is not there from a people's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've covered that quite significantly. Another group, please.
I think we're next. I think we had a bit of a different conversation, mostly around sustainability of the funding beyond the funding period. Specifically speaking about, in some cases, the UCDP grant being used to sustain core functions of the university, and so what happens when that funding runs out. Some of the other elements we spoke about is that there are a lot of great initiatives developed, like the academic advisors and so on, but there's also not necessarily a prioritization by institutional leadership to create spaces for those programs to be institutionalized. And so as the funding runs out and the priority in the institution isn't absorbed, it kind of goes to waste a bit. I think the second thing we spoke about is around some of these programs or some of the institutions. There's key roles within institutions that are still remain contract positions. So a lot of the individuals that we want to work with on academic development and curriculum development, they're stressing about, are they having a job next year? And so it's difficult to really embed yourself and participate in such a program. So there's a morale concern around people on the ground doing the actual work. And I think one of the things we did speak about is almost personal individual capacity to engage with such complex elements that's out of your control. We did ask the question, who has control over that? Like, is there some way to make a decision so that these key positions, functioning positions, don't have to be contracted, because that would just be great from a systemic level. And in the meantime, how do we make sure that these individuals have capacity to engage? Because if I'm under that level of stress, I'm not going to necessarily have the capacity to care about my students or to care about academic development or to care about curriculum. So we do so many of these programs, but the people on the ground are struggling with the basics, and so they can't really participate in the way that we want them to and that they want to. So that was kind of the focus of the conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we also covered the aspects about the funding and the contracts quite a bit yesterday as well in our discussions. But I think something for us to take away from their discussions is funding sustainability. So we don't look at specific aspects about it, but just generally, is this going to be, what's the term we used yesterday? Forever, a forever grant. So thank you very much. Next group.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. I think our group focused on something that was never thought of within this summit, which is which is more on looking at issues of languages, multilingual teaching in higher education. And we grounded this with what is happening now within basic education. And we are saying the very best and first collaboration should be what DBE and DHET is doing. And again, the link between what the schooling system, what is happening within the schooling system and what is happening within universities. That realignment, collaboration on that, and making sure that we take multilingual teaching and learning within higher education and prepare for the current project which is happening within DBE, which is on mother tongue-based bilingual education, and be ready for that as universities, as a group. That's what we were thinking of. And we call that multilingual teaching in higher education, linked to the MTBBE project also. Okay. For universities. And I think one of my colleagues touched on the science part of it, on how, underdeveloped we are within, languages, especially our African languages. And I'll hand over to him so that he can explain further on that particular part.
I don't think he wants to explain. Okay, colleagues, it's fine. I think we're getting the principle of what's being said in terms of multilingualism. We are aware as well in higher education that there are, across the sector, multilingual projects as well. So what we are saying is connect the dots between basic education, higher education, what's there, and how we can collectively advance that. So I saw a few hands go up.
Okay.
Other tables, where are you? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director. Most of the things that we discussed in our group have been mentioned, so I will not go through them. I will just mention one, which I feel that it hasn't yet been elaborated into, which is about the research that we are currently doing, especially in our historical disadvantaged institutions. It is more scholarship research rather than innovative research. So we were saying we need to move from scholarship to innovative research and to commercialization. And we also need to move from commercialization to the research impact, following the NRF framework, to see what is the societal impact of the research that we are doing, the environmental impacts of the research that we are doing, and also how do we monitor and evaluate that particular impact. We can even develop a tool of monitoring and evaluating the research that we are doing for the benefits of our universities, our societies, and also in alignment with national priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we also, with that area in terms of research impact, there is work also being done now, so we actually need to pool everything together and be able to fund it. There's a hand there. Shiba?
Yeah, thank you so much, and good morning once again, colleagues. Our group came up with the following, and I'll start off with a sustainability question. I mean, although it has been mentioned, but very much in relation to funding sustainability, we thought sustainability issue is a challenge across. I mean, starting with funding, interventions, policies, all across is a major issue. So it's important that we somehow find a way of ensuring that we sustain, particularly around interventions, beyond funding. The second issue we thought of is issues around ethics. And this is a broad issue. I mean, moral standards from, of course, in our society up until, anywhere. I mean, if you look at higher education, for instance, on issues to do with research and publication, there's a big challenge in that area. And we think that if we strengthen, we focus on issues of ethics, we will cover a lot of space in terms of turning around the situation. The third issue we thought is public health. We are aware that there's been a number of interventions supported through this window, but this area remains an issue across the system, something that we can consider as we go into the future, especially because even those that are in existence or currently implemented, there's no collaboration between them. And as a result, they end up not really doing much in terms of impact on the ground. The next issue relates to capacity in our universities in terms of being able to adapt to the fast changing world. And this covers issues of technology, politics, a whole lot of things that you can think. I mean, our world has become so dynamic and fast changing to a point where to prepare a student takes a whole lot, especially once you consider issues of decoloniality and the balances or considerations around global competitiveness. So capacity around all of those issues in our universities is becoming particularly urgent. And I think this is a matter linked with the curriculum development issues or curriculum transformation issues in our system. Across all the disciplines, by the way. The question relating to student disability, our universities are doing something we are aware. The department through this window as well, of course, is doing something. There is a initiative that is supported to be done, but we think this area also remains urgent. Issues to do with capacity to support students with disability across the system. Yeah, other issues I think are covered to do with commercialization for innovation, for entrepreneurship, and we fully agree with all of those. Governance, which is the last one. Our system is very much in danger or endangered by questions relating to good governance or lack thereof. And it's something that we need to find a way to address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think he also gave us the kitchen sink there. Some of the areas are currently being covered in the current call that has been out, students with disabilities. And in terms of entrepreneurship, we have Eddie there as well, covering the sector. So there's a few that are already, underway as well. The commercialization is in the current call. So let's allow others. Sorry, Laverne, what was the term you used for the global student? Global, right? Certain things we need to actually grasp on and then look at how whatever we are saying fits into that. Where was the hand? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, colleagues. Yulene Schiller from the University of Port Eyre. So our discussion was also in technology in higher education and disruptive technologies. But our conversation went a little bit further than that to say the importance of social consciousness that we need to create amongst our students, because what makes us different as universities? Why would students want to come to university if everything is so easily accessible just through AI and technology? So a lot of young people just find universities irrelevant. So how are we training students, or rather educating students, to be ethical citizens? And the whole thing about social consciousness, what is happening in this disruptive environment? Are we critically ensuring, or are we developing critical scholars that can make a difference in the workplace? So whilst we are training them, what is this hidden curriculum, and should this curriculum be so hidden? If all these graduates from the different universities, what type of change can they bring in when they come into the workplace? When an employer employs a graduate, they realize that this person's not just going to have the skills, but they're bringing a difference. Why do you employ? And it's not looking down at any other sector, because there's a value chain and importance in the sector from different, how different people contribute to societies. But what makes higher education, universities of technologies, all of us, what makes our students different? And it's that critical engagement. How do we bring that together? So it's with this social consciousness, staff development on that. Because of the fast pace, we are not reflecting on what is happening, student development, curriculum development in that space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's another hand there behind you, alongside you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Charmaine van der Merwe from Stellenbosch University. So in our group, we had two ideas, and the one is supporting of researchers in terms of the infrastructure, technology, things that's needed to advance research at our institutions that's relevant. And then the other one was around curriculum, and it touches on some of the things that the colleagues already mentioned, but it's the idea of developing dynamic curriculums that's aligned with the workplace, and to involve or include then the knowledge and skills that students will need for after graduation. So it will also include then skills and knowledge that students need for this fast-changing, unknown world. But then there will need to be collaboration between different institutions that have similar programs, collaboration with industries, but then also collaboration with the bodies that approve programs, so that by the time that the programs are approved, it's still relevant. And because at the current rate that programs are approved in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, it might not be that relevant anymore.
Thank you very much. Our table of two, I would like you to have your say.
Okay, good morning, colleagues. I pray everybody's well. Program Director, I'm going to have to ask you, what exactly was the mandate? I'm not sure if we did exactly what you asked, but I'll share what we did and related to what you asked.
So basically, I would like you to share first what you were speaking about so we know.
Okay, well, we had a very, very in-depth conversation, especially since it was only the two of us and we could go deeper. And so we decided to talk about the National Program for Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education. And we have an expert on that here, and then we have me, who's very, very interested in that. Because I don't think it's fair to these students that we're going to let them think they're going to graduate and get a job, because we know it's not going to happen. So we have to figure out a way to instill this entrepreneurial mindset all the way across. So thinking about that, I learned the correlation between UCDP and UCEF in terms of both being concerned with students and staff. Then when we started talking about what EDHE does for staff development, my colleague here was saying they focused on teaching and learning and research. So of course, anybody who knows me would know my first question is, where's the community engagement? And so then we kind of teased that out and started thinking about how that could be something that could be added to this entrepreneurial aspect, because in the teaching and learning space, and as well as in the research space, there are a lot of colleagues and modules and projects that are already dealing with the community. And then the community could be more involved with helping instilling this entrepreneurship aspect, whether it's staff or students. And then he also was telling me about the entrepreneurial university as another focus, and that is perceived as being aligned with curriculum in UCDP, but I don't see it like that. Because to me, the curriculum part should be part of the staff development with the teaching and learning, research and community engagement, leaving the entrepreneurial university with the policies and practices and the broader things. So we think that those things should be considered. And then also, in terms of how this national program operates, there's a question, and I don't know, this could be something about that's worthy of a call to investigate further, about where the coordinator for EDHE is based in the universities. Because all universities, from what I understand, have a coordinator. But if they're faculty-based, let's say they're in the faculty of management science, how much is that going to help the people in social work? How much is that going to help the people in health sciences? So thinking about where that coordinator is based and where we could get the most leverage. So then the third thing that we were about to talk about is the epistemological focus of this entrepreneurship mentality. And I would raise questions about the extent that we consider indigenous ways of knowing and African ways of knowing, and even relying upon how the continent was prior to colonization and colonial settlers. There was a lot of marketplaces going on. There were a lot of educational institutions going on. There was a lot of prosperity going on before that disruption came. So if we're going to be doing all this in the 21st century and not thinking about or making sure the staff and students know about how things were, it's not going to be that easy to move forward without considering the epistemological focus. So I'll
Thank you very much. I can see you used your 10 minutes very, very productively. But I think importantly what they've covered, although we know EDI is part of the national projects and we all aware of what's going on in the EDI, but I think the aspects that have been brought to the conversation now in terms of where in the university, what type of curriculum, and I think other groups as well touched on this in terms of the entrepreneurship. So it's something that we need to look at the integration. You know, it's not only in one sub-program that we deal with entrepreneurship. How is it embedded across the other sub-programs as well? Okay, any other hands? The group right at the back. You thought I forgot about you. There's two groups at the back.
Okay, thank you. From our group, we looked at specifics, especially in mathematics. But fortunately, there is a project already that supports mathematics and statistics. So we didn't have much to say that this needs to be introduced. And of course, there's a room for expanding on that project where more institutions can be involved. So we don't have much to say along those lines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So has everybody had a chance now? Okay, so the last group at the back, is there any input from your side?
So a lot of what the colleagues said, we also discussed, especially the issue of ethics, but we also spoke about soft skills. There's a huge outcry from industry that many of our students do not have that soft skills that is required in the industry. So we talked about how do we align graduate attributes of universities with industry and professional bodies who do we satisfy? And one of the issues we thought that all the bodies will agree with is that ethics is one of those critical ones that cut across. We also spoke about leadership challenges in higher education in terms of generational interactions. How do we lead a generation that we don't understand? How do we work with people from a generation we don't understand? It affects pedagogy, it affects staff development and training as well. There is a huge difference because we are not wired the same way in different generations. And curriculum reform, again with a view of integrating ethics. So that came out very strongly. And I think the last thing we're concerned about is how do we prepare our students to be also future parents? So as 3 women on the table, we started talking about the amount of screen time and how do we balance humanity and technology. Because it's not either or. We have to be very careful that we maintain this balance. We've got to fight for that balance. You see kids at tables today, there's very little human interaction. So those were some of our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've covered certain areas that were not covered. We have another team here in the center.
Thank you. This is not necessarily feedback from our team, but something that I'd like to throw in the mix is that I think it's lovely to have the input from institutions in terms of where they would like the focus of collabs to be. But I think it would be important, especially with the incredible amount of reporting that we do as institutions to the DHET, to get a sense of what the DHET is seeing the need is. So some sort of meta-analysis across the sector in terms of where those needs are would also be very useful in terms of informing where those areas for collaboration might lie. And perhaps then to bring it back to a forum such as this for us to engage more deeply on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's noted. Thank you very much, because remember, we're not having a one-way discussion. It's also all our impressions in terms of the department as well, because the department is also on the ground and implementing and collecting data, our reports, as you say. So it's important that we gather as much information as we can, so that when we are funding or sending out new and calls in the future, it would actually be in the best interest of the entire sector. So I know we've covered most of the groups, but are there any people, I'm concluding now, you feel that there's a particular area that you'd like to voice out and share with the team here? Yes, Dr. Samuels?
Thank you. This is probably not a project going forward, but it's a point I'd like to make. We talk about collaboration, how we can work together, and we've heard about points come across in terms of what emerges from the research. And then we had the point about public health and how the different public health programs don't really work together. We are allowed to collaborate on lots of things, but we are not allowed to offer collaborative qualifications. And I think for me, that is a gap in the system.
Okay, you got a clapping, an applause from the VC.
We allowed to collaborate with our international partners and offer joint qualifications, which I think is wonderful. But we've lost something that I think could really transform us in terms of the quality of our offerings by having joint qualifications. Years ago, we used to have a joint MPH, a Master's in Public Health, offered by 5 institutions. The quality was amazing. Each brought certain strengths to the qualification. We need to reevaluate that and look at how we can put all of this collaboration we speak about into practice in terms of our offerings. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on another point. and expand on the issue of the literacies, which I think is key. I think it's a broadened understanding of academic literacies, though, because it focuses on the literacies of today, which will have multiple literacies. But I want to take the point that we should, I keep saying we got to close the loop. So where we trying to enhance student success, we should be having an integrated approach of these student development interventions, these staff development interventions, these curriculum transformation, all address literacies, for example, as an example. So I don't think we should be creating the silos of the student kind of interventions and staff. I think the staff interventions and the curriculum transformation must come to student success, or it's not worth us having it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to bring the session to a close. And I hope you had the opportunity to engage around this particular sub-program. And also our colleagues from DHET have taken the notes. And this is not the end of the engagement. It's a contribution towards broader engagement. And the engagement also takes place in the sector as well further before a call can go out. So thank you very much. Much appreciated. I don't want to summarize the contributions. It's quite a list here. So thank you for your contributions, and also for just trying to think out of the box, trying to look at the issues that face us as a sector, and trying to also put forward ways in which we can address that through this particular sub-program of the UCDP. So give yourselves a hand. We're going to move on with the program now, and the next session is a plenary, and we have two speakers in the session, and I'm going to invite them to the stage now. The first is Dr. Witty Green. He's no stranger to us. I think you all know him in some form or the other, besides not being a stranger to the sector, but also to DHET. And now he is the CEO on the Council of Higher Education. You'll all know the CHE, that's where your programs go. So he's going to today address us on advancing UCDP collaborations for transformation, strategic priorities in response to policy imperatives and contemporary higher education challenges. And it's going to also talk to many of the things that you've been actually alluding to now. And then we're going to have a further talk in the plenary, and that's going to be Prof. Makanya. He's a Commissioner of Public Services Commission, and this is also an area that we actually were saying yesterday and today, industry, community, and government partnerships with universities. How apt. So, gentlemen, may I invite you both to the stage to take your seats, and Prof. Green will go, Dr. Green will go first. Thank you. Come on, we need to give him a bigger hand than that.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Program Director. And good morning, Prof. Makanya. Really great to be here joining this UCDP event. Really great to see all the good work that is happening and continues to happen through this program. So as Jessica introduced me and gave me an honorary title in so doing, my name is Witty Green from the Council on Higher Education. And maybe just to start off a little bit about what the Council on Higher Education is. So the CHE is a body in the higher education space that is a public entity that has a role in multiple areas of higher education. So Jessica said your programs come to the CHE. That's correct. One of the roles of the CHE is to act as the Quality Assurance Council, the Quality Council for Higher Education. And we do that through various mechanisms, including accreditation, and that's the reference to the programs. But it's not the only role of the CHE. The CHE is also meant to be an intellectual hub and a Center of Scholarship for Higher Education. And so colleagues that are familiar with the CHE, and you see our website, you'll see the number of research projects that the CHE undertakes every year, the number of publications that are produced every year on a wide range of topics, and the pieces of advice that go to the minister as a result of that research each year. Each year we provide about 5 pieces of advice to the minister as per the mandate that the Higher Education Act gives us. So the CHE is also a research, a monitoring, scholarship body. And in a third leg of the work of the CHE is around transformation. The Transformation Oversight Committee's term came to an end about 4 years ago. And at that point, the minister asked the CHE to take over that function of transformation monitoring and oversight in the higher education sector. And so we are currently rolling that out in various ways, including through embedding it in our other work, the research work, the quality assurance work, but we are also currently developing a transformation monitoring framework that we're going to be using to engage institutions as we go forward. So that's enough about the CHE, and hopefully you've got a little bit of a bigger picture on what the CHE does and who it is. My brief today has been to just talk about some of the priorities that could underpin the UCDP broadly, and then specifically the institutional-led capacity development projects as part of the UCDP. So I want to start off with this diagram that I kind of put together just to kind of frame the work of the CHE, but I think also frame initiatives that we want to take forward in the sector, the big initiatives, like, for example, the UCDP. Higher education institutions are not ivory towers. They are located in context. And those contexts, the word local was utilized earlier on. Those contexts kind of move from very local community levels to very global levels. And if we are going to do justice to being a higher education institution, I think we have to be considerate of our context and the imperatives that exist in that context. And so in an attempt to do that, if we're looking at what's happening in relation to the global currently, we have huge issues around geopolitical tension, war and unrest across a range of places across the world, including now, very concerningly, in Iran and the Middle East, potentially blowing up into something much bigger that's going to impact on all of us very drastically. We have a rise in nationalism and conservatism. Borders are being closed down. There's an increasing fear of the other. And we see that in South Africa as well. The issue of xenophobia playing out in a whole range of spaces and places, very concerningly even in Parliament. And pressure being placed on higher education institutions and institutions like the CHE to be South African focused. I think it's a high area of concern. We have social fragmentation, racial fragmentation, class fragmentation across the world, including in our very local spaces. Now, how do universities respond to that? How do higher education institutions respond to that? How does the UCDP take on those issues? Another cluster of big issues are the issues around environment. Environmental disasters are playing out across the globe. If it's not floods in one country, it's fires in another, or drought somewhere else. Certainly climate change is raising its head. We have global health challenges reoccurring. The pandemic was a big one. There are reports that say the pandemic is not the last one that we'll experience. We have challenges around food and water security, even in South Africa, where we should have an abundance. And in fact, we do have an abundance, but we don't share appropriately. Now, how does the UCDP, through its projects, think about responses to all of those? including through curriculum in universities, which could be very responsive to those issues. Another cluster of issues is technological change. The fourth industrial revolution, maybe even the fifth industrial revolution by now. Rapid rise in technological developments, so much so that we can't keep up. A changing world of work. Our graduates are going into contexts that from the time they start their studies to the time they graduate, the context has changed already. Right? So this issue of work ready really needs to be interrogated. Can we really produce work ready graduates if the context is changing so rapidly? I think we as a higher education sector have to be focusing on work able graduates. Graduates that are able to work in contexts that change. If we try to produce a work-ready graduate for a particular job that exists today, by the time the graduate transitions into employment, the work has changed. Work-able graduates rather than work-ready graduates, I think is what our mission in higher education is. Someone mentioned this issue of soft skills, I think really important. Work-able graduates who have the soft skills that enable adaptability and flexibility and responsiveness. Artificial intelligence is a huge issue. The rapid rise of large language models and the affordances, but also the problems that come to the fore in relation to that is something we have to bend our heads around and grapple with and respond to effectively in higher education. Coming closer to home, there's a whole nest of issues that bedevil our development. Corruption remains a huge challenge. Poverty, the levels of poverty in South Africa remain astounding. The biggest differential in the world exists in South Africa between the poor and the rich. Unemployment levels continue to rise. We have a growing youth unemployment problem. And people refer to it as a powder keg that can set off huge levels of unrest in the country if we are not paying attention to it. I must say, though, that in higher education, if you track the employment rate of our graduates, it is much better than the general unemployment rate of the youth. About 4 years ago, it was 8%. The last research that we did, I think it was last year, showed that that climbed up to 11%. So it's rising. It's a concern. And there is an issue that we have to think about there. How do we prepare our graduates for employment, including self-employment, in a context that is Africa and South Africa? How do we create entrepreneurs? As one of the colleagues said in a comment just now, how do we create entrepreneurs that can work with African and South African contexts, markets, and opportunities? Crime is something that limits our development, limits investment. We all feel the effects of crime on a daily basis. And then coming closer to home in our institutions, there's a whole range of issues that we need to address related to learning and teaching, social engagement, governance, leadership and management, institutional cultures, research and innovation. And many of the inputs from around the tables were honing in on that. So I think these are some of the big imperatives that, and the big priorities that we have to face as a higher education institution in South Africa, including through the large national interventions that we have, like the Ucdp. The Ucdp has to be a transformation driver. It was conceptualized as that right at the beginning, as the vehicle or instrument in the Department of Higher Education and Training that would seek to drive transformation in the sector. I think we need to take stock. Has it done that? Is it doing that? Is it contributing? Through all the range of mechanisms, sub-programs, projects, are we advancing the transformation agenda? And we have to think a bit broadly about transformation. You know, it's for me, three-dimensional at least. We have to talk about the transformation of higher education. So are we using the UCDP to transform higher education in and of itself? And then how are we supporting higher education to be a transformative agent in society is another element of transformation. So we have to think of transformation of higher education, transformation in higher education, in institutions specifically. Some institutions lag behind in terms of even the quantitative transformation metrics, and we're needing to be looking much deeper than the quantitative. Is the UCDP creating change in those institutions? And then we have to look at transformation by higher education. How are higher education institutions working to transform the context in which they exist? The UCDP has to also be considered as a policy driver, right? It was put in place for that reason as well, to assist with the implementation of higher education policy in the country. And so what I've done in this slide is to just put the policies that are in play and are in place since democracy. Starting off with the white paper on higher education transformation in 1997, the first piece of legislation for higher education in the country. The white paper for post-school and higher education, post-school education and training in 2013. So two critical white papers that really should be foregrounding and backgrounding the work of the UCDP. Is the UCDP intentionally taking cognizance of the direction provided by those white papers? We have several national policies that have been published, gazetted over the years. So in 2013, the Higher Education Qualifications Sub-Framework, our qualifications instrument for the country. How is the UCDP assisting in implementation of the HEQSF? We have the policy for the provision of distance education, which has to be revamped, urgently so. We can't talk about the binary between contact and distance anymore. The terrain has changed completely. There are multiple modalities of delivery beyond just contact and distance. Could the UCDP assist to drive that process of re-looking the policy on distance education and reformulating it so it talks to the current and future context? I think we need a national project to do that, led by the sector. The policy framework on differentiation, we've meant to have a range of differentiated institutions in the country. The opposite is true. We have a tendency towards amorphism. Every institution wants to be research-led and research-intensive. You know? I mean, we don't need all our universities to be research-led and research-intensive. We need some to be teaching-led and teaching-intensive. Right? And we need universities to critically engage this and create a mission and a mandate for themselves that contribute to what we need as a country. And how is the UCDP assisting to drive a differentiated higher education sector? The policies on recognition of prior learning, credit accumulation and transfer and assessment. Prior learning still, recognition, RPL, still very much immature in the country and still very much hit and miss. Some institutions have taken it on strongly, others by the way. Right? How do we drive a national approach to RPL? Given that we still need to recognize a past history where people learn in diverse ways and haven't all had an opportunity for formal access to studies. The language policy, someone mentioned just now, right? That they were the only group that spoke about the language issue, right? We have a language policy for higher education. Right? To what extent are we driving the language policy through our national activities? The Quality Assurance Framework for South Africa, published in 2020, right? Building quality in higher education as a key imperative. We can't have transformation if it's not a quality system. It can't be transformed. Transformation and quality go hand in hand. And how is the UCDP assisting to drive quality in higher education? Someone mentioned articulation. So you can see all of these imperatives are there. They're in the policies. It's about us recognizing them and intentionally taking them forward. We don't need to brainstorm and rethink them, you know. I think we have kind of done that work. It's about action at this point in time, taking forward the range of imperatives, right? There's a very new one now, just published last year, the Policy for the Recognition of Higher Education Institutional Types, which now talks to greater differentiation. Are any of our universities willing to become higher education colleges? I doubt it, you know. And yet higher education colleges are colleges that are meant to focus on teaching and learning and professional and vocational education. Isn't that a key mandate of higher education? Right? So certainly some of our institutions should be aspiring to do that, but I doubt any of our 26 universities will. Right? How do we work to kind of grow a strengthened college sector in the country that improves access, improves articulation, and that serves and plays a meaningful role in terms of teaching and learning focus in the country, right? We have an emerging policy at the CHE that will be published in the next couple of months. And someone mentioned this earlier on. We're not allowed to do collaborative qualifications. In fact, many institutions have done so. You mentioned one example, outside of a regulatory framework, because none existed. There's one also at NMU. There's one around, I think, data or something, the Western Cape's involved in. So there are these ones that have happened outside of regulation and kind of moving into the space because there's an urgent need for it. So this policy will make it possible. The policy's name is a policy framework for the quality assurance of local and cross-border collaborative qualifications. And you can see the word local intentionally inserted there, because what it means is we're going to have local collaborative qualifications possible as we go forward. Institutions in the country can get together to develop a collaborative qualification that can be accredited as such and offered as such. Right? And this is in line with the policy on internationalization. Did I have the policy on internationalization? Yes, I did have it. The Ucdp should also be driving the internationalization agenda in the country as well, as was indicated earlier on. Okay, and then we have national plans that have come through from these various policies. The national plan of 2001 followed the 1997 white paper, and the national plan of 2021 followed the 2013 white paper. That kind of moved from policy ambition to practical implementation. Are we taking those national plans into account as we move? Right? So this is the national plan for PSET, the most recent one, the 2021 one. It has 6 system goals. Right? Integration and articulation is the first one. Access is the second one. Responsiveness is the third one. Relationships is the fourth one. Relationships between institutions, relationships with professional bodies, relationships with industry and workplaces. Quality is the fifth one. Efficiency and success. So if you're looking for priorities and imperatives for the UCDP, they are there. You know, they're outlined. And I think those capture all the comments and inputs that have been made. A colleague from, I think it was Stellenbosch, said, what is the DHET's view around what the priorities should be? If you ask him that question, I think he has the answer. Right? Here are the DHET's priorities as per the national plans. The CHE recently undertook an audit of all the public universities. Now we're moving away from audits because audit has a kind of connotation to it that it's a policing process and we kind of coming up to check and wield a stick. We're moving to what we're calling institutional reviews, utilizing generative and reflexive methodologies as we go forward, growing reflection in the system. Right? These audits were implemented in that modality as a transition, although we had to call them audits because the Higher Education Act still talks about audits. We're changing the Higher Education Act currently now. We refer to them as institutional reviews. But we have a massive amount of data now generated through these audits. Right? And I think we need to research that data quite intensely. So in preparation for this, I scanned through at least 5, and I just chose a random sample of 5 of the institutional audit reports to try and pick up what are the imperatives that the reports are showing for development and capacity building and strengthening. What are the areas of weakness? Now, it was very interesting in that all of the reports that I read referenced the UCDP. So the UCDP is actually seen as quite important, quite visible, and is referenced as an instrument that is supporting many, many initiatives in institutions. It might be interesting, Mandisa, for the UCDP to support some research on deriving from all 26 university reports what the critical issues are, as a way of framing the next call for collaborative projects. It's not a massive exercise. I think we can do it if we have a good master student that we can allocate to that exercise. During that exercise, we could also pull out all the references to the UCDP as a way of evaluating the impact of the UCDP as coming through the institutional audit projects. So one of the big things that comes through is we need a focus on qualifications, programs, and curricula. Right? It has to be a continuing priority for the UCDP, capacity development around qualifications, programs, and curricula. And so you can see this issue of collaborative qualifications is one of them. Right? Building the capacity in the system towards the offering of collaborative qualifications. Maybe even piloting 1 or 2 so that we can test how this can happen effectively in the system. I want us to think about beyond just university collaborative qualifications, because it could be university TVET. It could be university private higher education institution. University industry is a no-brainer. It must be, especially for the vocational and professional programs. University industry collaboration has to be there. Right? This program qualification mix is an issue. Is there intentionality around program qualification mixes of institutions? Or is there ad hoc response? We need to do AI now. Let's have an AI qualification. Is there consideration of how does this qualification fit into the context of the university and its vision, mission, its mandate, how it's positioning itself? So I think there's some level of development needed for the colleagues that are working with conceptualizing and putting together the PQM. The CHE is currently in an exercise to understand what the PQM for the nation looks like, the national PQM. So kind of synthesizing the PQMs of each of the institutions to look at the national PQM. What are the gaps? Where is the overemphasis? How does a national PQM talk to national needs around industry and employment and so on and so on? But I think there's an issue we need to address there. I'm talking too much and I'm probably going to run over my time, so I'm going to run now. Curriculum transformation. Curriculum transformation is a big issue that has come through, right? And not just the decolonization issue, because decolonization is one, and it's an important one. But it's just also about curriculum reform and curriculum renewal, How is our curriculum keeping pace with developments in society, in industry, in workplaces? Delivery modalities. I mentioned this already. We are in a space where institutions already moved into multiple modalities. Policy has kept behind. We have this policy on distance, which is needing to be revamped. We have a funding model that's still talking to distance and contact. That's preventing institutions from really making obvious that they're not doing distance and contact anymore. We're having a review of modes of provision now. Many universities are not participating in that because they're worried that even though they're using multiple modalities, if they say so, their funding is going to be cut because they're not contact anymore, which is crazy in the current context. Right? So capacity development around delivery modalities. Language, right? Someone mentioned language. I think we need a much bigger focus here, right? More than just lip service, right? USEF is leading some quite interesting work through COPAL. It's a group that focuses on language. How do we kind of scale across the system these initiatives going forward? Work integrated learning, a really big one, right? Weak work integrated learning in institutions, in universities, weak linkages between institutions and industry, students not accessing work integrated learning and this impacting on their success. Articulation, right? We have a project, the UPSET project around articulation. How do we upscale this work? Right? Articulation becomes much bigger now. It's not just articulation between TVETs. It's articulation between higher education institutions too. Because if we have colleges, higher education colleges, that can only go up to a certain level of qualification, how do they articulate with universities who have the higher levels of qualifications? How do private and publics articulate in a space where we're wanting to have one higher education system? I do think the UCDP must pay attention to this issue. Increasingly, more and more students are accessing private higher education. I think we have almost 25% of our students in private higher education now. If we're only concerned about the universities, we are excluding 25% of our students and their needs and the quality for them. And if you look at the enrollment plan for universities, it's a flat enrollment plan for the next 5 years. Now, what does that mean? Where are the students going to go into? They're going to go into privates, and we're going to have more and more growth in privates and a bigger and bigger percentage. Right? So we have to be thinking about one higher education system, inclusive of public institutions, private institutions, inclusive of universities, university colleges, and higher education colleges. The nursing colleges are coming into higher education. The veterinary colleges, the agricultural colleges, the emergency medical care colleges are coming into higher education. How do we work with this bigger spectrum of institutions? Can the University Capacity Development Program remain the University Capacity Development Program? Or does it need to be the higher institution, higher education institution capacity development program, or something such like? Given that universities are only one part of the higher education system, and going forward, an increasingly smaller part, given the trends that we're seeing. Right? Micro-credentials, big issue. Right? We have to create flexible learning pathways. Formal qualifications are not the only route into employment. Across the world, we're seeing this trend. In South Africa, we're developing a framework for micro-credentials in education. Lots of work has already been done. How can the UCDP advance the use of micro-credentials as another learning possibility in higher education? And in collaboration with industry and employees, we've already spoken about. The other big issue is postgraduate studies. Right? The UCDP has to continue to have a focus on postgraduate studies. Supervision capacity comes out as a particular weakness that needs to be strengthened across the system. Supervision modalities, not just capacity, but the modalities. You know, the cohort models, the different models that we can use for master's and doctoral supervision. Exploration and capacitation for those. AI, assessment, and academic integrity, a big issue in postgraduate, not just in postgraduate studies, in all. But we certainly are concerned of the extent to which our postgraduate students are using AI to generate work, including their theses and dissertations. The Department of Science and Innovation is currently rolling out a project to investigate this issue of the extent to which this is happening in higher education and how we can work towards addressing it. AI is a powerful tool, but we have to learn how to use it judiciously and ethically. Can the UCDP play a role there? A student capacity, right? Chiba on the table there was talking about the picture in higher education shows that we still haven't cracked equitable participation. That as we go up the postgraduate pathway, the participation becomes less equitable. Less Black African students, less women students, as we move from honors up to doctorate. Right? And one of the issues is retention of students in the pipeline. Now, there are many factors impacting on that, including finances, social life issues, a whole range of issues. But one issue certainly is preparation of students to adapt to postgraduate requirements. Right? And how can the UCDP assist in that respect? Assessment capacity, given AI and its potential, how do we move towards modalities of assessment that really are authentic and really can tap into what the student actually knows and can do? The doctoral review that we undertook pointed to a paucity of professional postgraduate programs. There are very few postgraduate professional masters and doctorates. Most of the institutions have the academic masters or the academic doctorates. Again, in the aspirations that I was talking about earlier on. But we need professional masters and professional doctorates in the system as well. And so how do we drive that as a system? Right? And then we are currently conceptualizing a review of the masters to look at what the key issues are in the master's programs. So we're currently developing a master's qualification standard. There are a whole range of people involved in that, and we'll undertake a review of the masters. And maybe the UCDP has a role in supporting that work as a way of understanding what the postgraduate issues are in the masters so that the UCDP can be responsive to that. I'm hinting that you might get a proposal in this regard. Okay, graduate employability, big issue, right? A whole range of issues there that we have to be thinking about and picking up on. I'm not going to talk to them because Jessica's already weaving a stick. And then the last one is governance, leadership, and management. And Shiva picked up on this in his input, right? A critical issue in the sector. Our system is bedeviled by governance, leadership, and management challenges across a range of our institutions. And there's a number of issues that come to the fore in the UCDP, in the institutional audit reports, as listed there. Alignment, so how is governance, leadership, and management actually managing to coherently put together and lead the vision, mission, and mandate of the institution? The role and effectiveness of the governance structures, council, Senate, the institutional forums. A big worry that comes through is the loss of power and authority of Senate and the encroaching of other institutional structures onto Senate responsibilities, and the abdication of responsibility of academics in Senate, with Senate reduced to rubber stamping mechanisms that just approve policies that don't really actually drive the academic project in institutions. Is a key issue that we need to attend to. Administration, Vice Chancellor's office, the Registrar's office, and then a whole big issue of student leadership, student management, student governance, right? And the role of SRCs and the capacitation of students to move beyond the politics to the substance of higher education. Can our student leaders become more involved in learning and teaching, and research and innovation, and question the university's role in community and community engagement? I think are key imperatives as we go forward. Last but not least, quality. Right? There's a huge need for quality assurance development in the sector. The CHE is wanting to step back and give institutions much more authority around quality. But that can only be the case for institutions that have strong internal quality assurance. You know, we're talking about institutions approving their own programs going forward. Only if they can. And many institutions are not at that point. Right? Internal quality assurance is immature in many of our institutions. So how does the UCDP assist to develop quality across the system? The UCDP is a program that is about partnerships. And I think this is where its strength is. Right? These projects work from the ground up. You have the imperatives now, we understand them. What can you as a sector do to address those imperatives? I've spoken about this already, I'm not going to speak about it. Right? Higher education is much more than the universities, and increasingly so as we go forward. How does the UCDP expand its view? Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Green, and I'm sure you agree with me that That's the talk that we needed. All of us, and while you are digesting that and preparing your comments, or if there's anything that you want to engage further with Dr. Green, we will do so after the next speaker. And now it's my pleasure, Prof. Makanya, you have been sitting there so patiently, and I really want to appreciate you and welcome you to the stage. And he's going to address us on industry, community, and government partnerships with universities. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Just to greet all of you and to say that it is good to see my former colleagues here having exited higher education, more than 5 years ago. So I was hoping that when one rocks up here, perhaps there might be some kind of a link with what your requirements are, with what the University of Johannesburg had requested me to do just the other day. It's 2 days ago. They had actually asked, they were doing their own capacity development program for their executive team, and had requested one to reflect just on the question of how that, is conceptualized, not at a theoretical level, but rather on what you've experienced and what does that mean in the context, of higher education and the challenges that we are confronting at this day and age. So, but be that as it may, I think we can leave that. But I just want to start off by saying, you'll see that I needed to ensure that I greet all of you here. I know that there are vice chancellors who are part and parcel of today's discussions, DVCs, the team, our senior officials from the department, and colleagues from industry, I assume, should also be part and parcel of what we are doing here. And civil society, I'm not sure whether they may be part and parcel of this. But for me, obviously, it's an honor, to be with you in this forum. And I just want to say to all of you that maybe what one is going to be talking about is going to at least register some relevance, in the work that you are currently pursuing here. But you'll see that as universities, we are called upon to do much more than what we actually argue we've signed up for. So we are in an environment where we often feel that we perhaps don't even have control on what we are doing, largely as a result of pressures that come from virtually everywhere, from within and from without. And in many instances, we feel sandwiched as well because of pressures from above and pressures from below. And that itself puts us in a very awkward situation because we say to ourselves, what does this mean in all honesty? And what is the future, of what we are all about? But the reality at the end of the day is that remember that as universities, our role is to curate, this future knowledge system that the university is all about. So that creation must be understood in a manner where we need to think, in a realistic sense of the word about what it means. I mean, think about what an artist view is of curation. They'll be talking about all these kinds of things, of planning, of putting processes in place and so on. And then at the end of it all, they will say that now we are exhibiting. So the exhibition is basically a manifestation of all the work that has taken place. So this is what the universities are doing. So in a large measure, some of the work that you do is not even recognized, by the way, because you don't simply work on the basis of that which is clearly defined, in an objective sense of the word. You are always working, because wherever you are, your thinking processes are the drivers of the work that you produce at the end of the day. So that is why I just want us to look at this day now as the gathering of more than just an academic event, but rather that it symbolizes, this collective national initiative, that will fortify universities as catalysts for our own social development, but also of economic development, as well as institutional transformation, within our own society. So now, in this instance, there must be a point at which, as universities, we should begin to reflect not just among ourselves in the environment where we are, but begin to reflect even with civil society. You know, there are things that we normally miss, that ordinary citizens have something of value that they can add in the work that we do. So unless we have those conversations with them, we're never going to understand what we are putting in place in solving the kinds of issues that are confronting us. I mean, I just want to cite a simple example for you. In one of the fora, one person asked me a simple question to say, okay, you come from a university environment. How do you explain the crisis that the country is facing? That currently we have a situation where you can't talk about that this country has anything that has to do with values, you know, and norms and so on. The society has fallen apart completely, right? So social disorganization is right at the core. So what is that you can rescue out of this? Now they said, what have you done as a university? What have you deposited in this country, both at society level, but also in industry? If there is this collusion that cuts across the board of people whose mandate they actually are pursuing is not that one that you've trained them for, but is that one of accumulation, of stealing from whatever environment that they find themselves in. That's what they were saying, what have you done? Because you need to understand that, because at the end of the day, you can't say you don't have a role. So maybe at some point you need to begin to review the way in which you've conducted, you know, your own work. So these are kinds of questions that, I mean, we cannot afford, you know, to miss as we have these conversations. So now as universities, for us, this is a pivotal point in our history. I mean, Dr. Green, you've just mentioned this. You know, it's important for us to actually begin, as we reflect, to understand that. So higher education institutions are finding themselves in an environment where they have to reevaluate their own roles in society. You know, where they have to view themselves not only as hubs of knowledge generation, but also as partners in addressing these societal challenges. Because, as I say, these questions are not going to go away, you know, but also we have to foster innovation and support national development. So we have understood universities, you know, during our times where we argued that, you know, we do our own things, so they must not bother us. Let them just do their own thing wherever they are. But I mean, the reality that has dawned right now and right here is that we can't afford to do that. We are part and parcel of the same system. So to what extent do we then go to our own society and say, this is a role that we are supposed to be playing, and this is how things are supposed to be pursued in order for us to make a success of what we are tasked to do? Now, then the point of enhancing our collaboration with government agencies, the industry sectors and communities become critical in this instance, because they will then be ensuring that what we teach and what students learn and what we research is also aligned with our own societal demands. Now, we have an obligation, you know, as a country. We have a constitution that is actually being viewed as one of the best. But the joke part of it is that we have a constitution on the one hand, it is the best, but the society is actually a disaster. So how do you bring the two together? Because there is no meaning about what the constitution says and what we actually are doing. So what are we up to wherever we are? So then we say our constitution is talking about critical questions here, national development that includes equity, accountability, representativeness, efficiency, and nurturing human potential. So universities have a role to play in this instance. Now we say these principles are essential, you know, for our own organizations in developing the future of the leaders that we have to produce, who are going to be the drivers of the knowledge as we move into the future. Now, we work at this point because 3 years ago, as I said, you know, because I'm coming out of retirement, was asked, you know, to be part and parcel of this team of the Public Service Commission. So the question really that arose in my own mind was, what is this organization? What is it about? What is it up to? Now, if you look fairly closely, we have an organization that has been there since 1912. And the task of Public Service Commission, as it was at that point, is that it took the responsibility of hiring everybody who has to do with public sector, of training them, of channeling them in whatever area that they had to perform in, and so on and so on. So even assessments and evaluations were conducted by the same body. Now, let's move then fast forward. Now, post-independence, questions then arose about the society that we're beginning to build, out of the tatters, of an apartheid system. So the rebuilding, a process where we are to transform, then meant that the kind of a Public Service Commission that was there then will no longer be relevant for the kind of environment that we are to build, because it will be steeped in the same environment that is supposed to be monitoring. So the argument then was, no, let's rethink this organization so that it then distances itself from the public service. So this is the kind of a public service system that was now created, arising out of the Public Service Act of 1997. So if you recall, at that stage, Dr. Zola Square, who really established this particular department, the questions that had arisen at the time were, how do we manage a situation in the public service where you find that as a politician you get elected to come and lead a particular portfolio, but then you have all these professionals who are in departments who are running in their own manner and so on, but their orientation is from an apartheid system. Do you understand? So the question really was, now we need to develop a system that then says, let's dislodge whatever we had had and start something completely anew, so that we can then have a system that begins to talk in the language of the country that we're beginning to develop. So this act then said, we are now establishing a Public Service Commission that is going to be independent of the state, and it's going to be operating outside the state, as it were. So it is established on the basis of Section 196 of the Constitution to have this oversight in the administration of public administration, so across the board. Now, it is informed by Section 195 of the Constitution, and recall that Section 195 of the Constitution is informed in a large measure by the values of our Constitution. Now, if you think about our country is an environment that actually differentiated between its own. So there were people who were operating on the margins, people who were operating at the center. There were all those kinds of funny things that were happening at the time, that the resources will then be channeled to those that were at the center. Those at the periphery will not be getting, the kind of resources in equitable fashion, and so on and so forth. Now, the rethinking then said, let's establish this organization that is now going to be driving the agenda that says the equitable arrangement of the distribution of resources is going to be the driver of what we have to win. But everything else that we are going to be doing henceforth is going to be on the basis of these values. One of them being at the center, being that one of human dignity. That if you are there, the people that you serve them in a non-discriminatory manner. So if you are then in the public service, yours is to deliver a service in a manner where you will have liked to receive the same service yourself. But the interesting thing in the environment where we are is that much as all those systems were put in place, you recall that at the time, the driver was the Batupili principles that said it is actually another one first before me. But what we've seen of late is that it is actually me first before the other. So that is why when you then look at our public service environment, it is a contradiction of the very same values that we're talking about. So I'll not go into detail, with them, because I will share that, some other time if time permits. Because virtually everything else that then we have to do has to use that lens in the understanding of the environment where we are. So the interesting thing now is that here we are, we walk into this public service environment, and we discover that actually what is happening is the complete opposite of that which is spelled out at that level. Look at service delivery, for instance. It is almost zero. Almost zero. Our own delivery systems have fallen apart. Now, when you ask very simple questions from the same public servants, you discover that there are so many other contradictions that you still need to try to make sense of, because there is another element which we have not begun to even interrogate, where you find that within the manner in which the Public Service Commission argued was that we need to train those who are in this environment in an understanding that says that there must be a clear-cut interface between those who are executives and those who are professionals. So that you then say the executives are those who are elected because they're at a political level, right? And then those who are professionals are accounting officers, so that there is a clearly defined and delineated environment of our own roles, so that we don't actually start fighting, because these are conflicts that we are experiencing now in the environment, where we find that that terrain is not necessarily safe because of those kinds of battles. So this is an area that we are supposed to be cleaning up, but it's taking some time, because what has been happening, which is what we've also observed, we've released reports on this, is that because the Public Service Commission has been operating in this particular manner on the basis of that Act of 1997, but there has been an understanding that it gets its own appropriations via a department of the state, which is the Department of Public Service and Administration. And that distorts its own identity. And the view then is that no, but this department is conflicted because it services that department at the expense of what its role was supposed to be. But secondly, remember that the complication about how it operates has to do largely with what had been conceptualized to say that in the initial phase of this new body, it will only operate at a national level and a provincial level, but it will not have any role to play at a local government level, but also at the state-owned entities level. Now, you will then be my own, commentators here to say, what has that done? All of you understand clearly that the bulk of the crises that we're experiencing in the country are in the local government level and in the state-owned entities, largely as a result of the fact that this body does not have that oversight in those areas. That is what now has been keeping this Public Service Commission very busy over the last few years recently, to say, now let's live up to how it had been envisaged, to have a role in public administration, which partly explains why there is this new bill, the Public Service Commission Bill of 2023. Right now, as I'm talking to you, that's why I keep on checking here, it is being presented at the National Council of Provinces, because early this year, it was approved by the National Assembly. So we have to go through all those processes. So we've been doing these consultations and so on. Now, the interesting thing is that there is a huge level of interest among communities across the country that we want this oversight, because they've discovered that the Public Service Commission actually has power to summons even ministers, by the way, to account. So something that has not happened as a result of the fact that these areas are not necessarily part and parcel of what is happening currently. So that is what we are currently driving. I remember very well, I had just joined when it was debated in 2023, in Parliament. There were some kinds of discomforts, from some ministers to argue that, but is it not going to mean that executive authority powers are going to be diminished? We said, no. Actually, the reality is that executive authority powers are going to be enhanced in the sense that executive authorities are going to be finding an organization that is going to be fighting for delivery of the work that they are responsible for. At this point, that is not happening. So, in a sense, we managed to handle that particular tension, but right now it is supported across the board. So we hope that even from the National Council of Provinces, it is going to go through. So it's the only structure that is a Chapter 10 in terms of the Constitution. All the constitutional bodies currently are Chapter 9 institutions, and others are Chapter 13, and so on. So if we move then quickly, that from the side of our own university capacity development program, we say that this represents, our own aspirations. So if we enhance our institutional capacity and foster innovation in all these areas, well, then this program is helping us, in contributing to the development of our own system in education. But it's got to be excellent and also equitable. Now, this has a huge transformation potential if we make a success in the kind of work that we are supposed to win in this instance. So I just want to take you now in this area that we are talking about the work that we've put in place. But the reality is that much as we are registering progress on the one hand, we are saying that there are deeper challenges that remain that we have not really begun to address. First year dropout rates, largely among African students have persisted. So I think this is a question that we need to acknowledge and we have to address, we have to deal with. So I don't know where things are at this point in time because this was some time ago. Once again, in terms of South African scholars, who are black, that their representation at high levels is still fairly limited. So those are areas that need to be addressed. So I guess that some progress has been made as things stand. Dr. Green has spoken about that report, the Sweden report, so I will not get into that at this point. Now, I just want to tell you that from the side of the work that we do, it's important to understand that if you don't have the leadership that has an appreciation of these kinds of commitments, you are never going to win. It's as simple as that. So that is why you need to be very clear about this kind of transformation that the universities are supposed to be driving, to say that let's get our entire executive teams to be part and parcel of them so that we can progress in a manner that we desire. So this part, I'm going to jump and just to talk about the investments that are supposed to be making. So we need then to see ourselves, as responding to the challenges that are confronting us in the environment where we are. So the issues of our curriculum transformation. So is there some work that we still need to do in that area? So from the discussions, that I participated in when I came in, I realized that you are raising some serious questions that need to feature in this instance. Now, student development is a very interesting area. Dr. Green, you've spoken about this one because it's the extent to which students are understood within the environment as part and parcel of what we are developing. So how do we get those students who are making a success of the work that we are actually mandated to do to begin to have an appreciation of what we are doing, as professors in those institutions and so on, with a clear-cut commitment to say, because they are here, we can understand their brilliance. We are the ones then who are going to be mentoring them to grow in the environment where we are. Remember that many students rock up at universities just to do degrees and to exit. But it is us who make them to have an interest in staying. So how do we do that? It's the kind of time that we spend with them, to develop them, to take interest in them. I heard some of us actually argue that difficult students, we have no time for them. And you'll discover that actually it is those difficult students that normally make it, so that you have to have an interest in. On the question of staff development, we need to make huge investments in this area and not do it in a half-hearted fashion. Let's not do it as an afterthought. Let's put resources in this area so that when we say we are developing our own academics, let's have something that is visible. If we are saying that we are taking them through a research program so that they can publish and do this and that and so on and so forth, how do we get that program in place and how do we monitor where that program is delivering the results? So in many instances, we develop these kinds of programs and then we drop them and we go and do something else. That's why that question of sustainability, Professor, becomes very important. How do we understand the programs that we put in place in a sustainable kind of fashion? So that as universities, the program has been funded by the DHET, But from the university, I have a very clear view in my mind that 5 years down the line, I shall get resources to take over, but the program shall continue. So it is not a program that is going to exist solely on the basis or on the back of the DHET, because that means that I have no appreciation of what the program is all about. So that's a thinking that we should be having, because in many instances we fall short of this understanding. So academics, if we want to keep them, we can only succeed because we are making this kind of investment in a clearly defined fashion. So the question of curriculum transformation, because Dr. Green has spoken about it, I'm not going to sit so much on this one. I just want to take you through the question of partnerships. You know, partnerships in our case, you know, are appearing also in an accidental fashion. We don't have a deliberate kind of, you know, process of these partnerships. You know, you go to other countries, Professor, you discover that this is a university of technology. The way in which it is structured, when you exit from the door of that particular university, opposite that university is a motor industry. Those professors are actually also moving out of the university to go to industry. So they are also involved in industry. They come back and teach. And students, similarly, when they're told that they're doing work integrated learning, it's not something that is theoretical. They actually move from the university, they go across and they do that. So there is an intimate kind of a relationship in what they do. Now, in instances then when we find that we are simply just a university that is not a university of technology, we still have a responsibility of interacting with industry. So we can understand what's happening out there. Because remember that I come out of the university not with a career program, right? Because it was not meant for that. But I must be trained in a manner that will make me succeed when I walk into industry. Let me tell you what they used to say in the past. In industry, they used to say, if you come from the university, you have been trained and you are now malleable to do virtually anything. It was a very interesting notion from those managers. They will say that right up front. Now they will then say, you are going to be employed in that particular area. They knew that you are going to do it. They said the exposure, just in the few weeks, will help you to do it because the training will make you grounded to start developing in that area. So as universities, we are not necessarily then supposed to be worried about whether we are offering career-oriented programs and so on and so forth, but how our programs are structured and what is the content that we offer that is supposed to speak to the environment that we are releasing our students to so that they can make a success of what they do. I mean, many companies, for your information, you'll be surprised about this, they are prepared to hire their MDs as people who are actually professors of philosophy. And I've made some inquiries to them. They said these people actually are the most efficient because they are logical in what they do. So the way they manage my organization actually delivers the results. So these are things that we never think about. But from there, they understand that very well. But you see now, it's a combination. What else are we combining that philosophy with? So that students at least have something that they can sell when they get in such an environment. So these partnerships in that instance then play a critical role. That's why we need to drive this, you know, in a very clear-cut manner. So now, I just want to then say, as we end, that let's begin to think in a serious manner, you know, as we sit around, you know, this place, you know, in Birchwood, to say to what extent what we've been talking about collaborating between and among universities in specific programs, for instance, that as we do that, let's look at how the policy environment, Dr. Green, is aligned with the pace at which things are changing. Because I can assure you that coming from the university environment, the battles that we've always had were that universities were prepared to move at the pace at which they would desire, but find that the policy environment is actually moving at a snail pace. So then they are confronted with a situation where they are told that, no, but how are we going to support you? Because we don't have a policy for that. Now you say, but we've been consistent in saying this is where things are going. So to what extent can we move at that speed, but at the same time understand that policy cannot necessarily be there for an extended period of time as it used to be in the past. At this day and age, with the changes that are currently happening in this rapid fashion, that policy must be understood as changing also within a very short space of time. So which means that if I'm in a policy environment, once I've released a policy, my concern must be what is the environment then beginning to predict so that I can produce a policy before I'm under pressure to produce that policy. In that manner, I'll be having an environment that supports what is required, in the domain where we're operating. So these are kinds of issues then that we need to take very seriously. But if we stop having these conversations with both industry and our own communities, we will actually miss out on these developments. That's precisely the reason why we find that this level of unemployment is consistently growing. It is growing and we need to curb it. But at the same time, conversations with basic education become very critical because they can't also be running their own show and delivering things that have nothing to do with universities. So currently, to be politically incorrect, you can't also have a situation where we are excited about that you can pass your matric, with 30%. Where have you ever heard of that? So we must be realistic and say to ourselves that if we are serious as a country, let's measure performance on the basis of performance. So we can't say it's performance because we hope that at some point we shall emerge and succeed. No, that's not how things work. So let it be determined in a clear-cut manner so that our metrics speak to the reality that we want to achieve. So these conversations are supposed to happen then, Dr. Green, and our team from higher education, with basic education so they understand what is that is actually troubling you in higher education. Because if they don't understand that, they'll continue doing what they are doing, which does not speak to what we are trying to achieve. Because at the end of the day, education is education. Right from early childhood development, right through to higher education. So that is why we need to understand education as education. So if you're running education, we are not running a component of education. We are running education across the board. Thank you. Do I come and join you there?
Enlightening talk, and I'm sure we've enjoyed it very much, and it has given us a lot to think about. And I know this table here, somebody says, no, that's my father. So, colleagues, thank you very much. And we do have a few minutes for you to engage with the two speakers. And they have said so much that is of interest and importance to DHET, to us, those are representing universities, to the work that we do, to the work of the sector. So I'm sure you want to engage with them. We do have a few minutes, so we're going to have a roving mic. And our first question is going to come from the back. So we'll take a round of 2 or 3 questions and then allow them to respond and then get back to you until our time is up. Let's go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My comment is directed at Professor Makanya. He actually touched on critical challenge that is threatening to tear the social fabric, which involves social fragmentation, cultural and moral decay, and the erosion of ethical values, which I think are very important. I did not get a sense of how universities, as microcosms of society, how they can be more intentional and more deliberate in actually contributing to address this pandemic. Or we say ours is to train staff, to capacitate them, students, and this is more of a problem of the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
It's me.
Yes,
Okay.
Professor.
Thank you very much, Prof. Good morning, Gwiti. Good morning, Prof. You look great. I was beginning to ask, what did we do to you when you were our Vice Chancellor that some people decided to do better? Yeah, it's wonderful to see you. My question is about the role of labor. in sustaining higher education. And my question is, why are we not touching on it? Because it does also speak to the role of students in attaining the attributes that will make them functional citizens. So, we are in the middle as academics, but there is labor with their own agendas. There are students with their own agendas. I wonder if students' agendas are the same as our agendas. So how do we bring these two together so that we go forward to where we are talking about today? Especially in our context in South Africa, where we say higher education is for the public good. And higher education, you have to also, when you are working in higher education, to be politically correct. So you have students that you need to be politically correct to them. You have labor that you need to be politically correct. But we have an agenda of developing citizens that are functional at the end of the day, because the economies depend on functionality of a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have another question? Anyone else? So, Prof. Makanya, you are in the hot seat today. So you're welcome to respond. And Witty, if there's anything you want to add, you're also welcome.
No, thank you very much. On the first question on the erosion of that ethics and values, and how universities can begin to address, these challenges, in some kind of a proactive manner. I think we need to accept that we are in an environment where we have to consistently think on our feet, as it were. I remember there was a time when in the area of economic and management sciences, with the fear of challenges, that were confronting industry, there was a view some decades ago to say that you can no longer be trained in that space without also being trained in ethics. So that by the time you qualify, you must also be understanding the environment in that ethical kind of manner. So that was the part that was taken care of at that stage. But the reality that we find ourselves in with the society that we have currently, remember I mentioned or to the team here, by the way, no, I'm sorry to you, I mentioned to the team here that as we're discussing, that what I find very interesting in our society at this day and age, is that when you talk with communities, in our township, you get surprised that young people actually are aspiring to become criminals. And for obvious reasons. Because all that they can see around them is a success story that is linked to a criminal. Now, if you say, no, actually education, is more important than anything else in life, they say, oh, Professor, we hear you, but we look at them, hey, they are hungry. So now these are young people saying that to you, and you can understand that we have a crisis that we have to come to terms with, because this is not something that we can theorize about. So what does it mean now? It says that from where we are as universities, we have not begun to have that kind of imagination of understanding these societies, that things have changed fundamentally. So that is why you find that people are scared of people instead of being scared of animals. So they will tell you that when I walk on the street, if there is no human being, I feel safe. But they tell you that if somebody rocks up, I think of turning back, because I do not know what this fellow is going to do. So what is it saying about our society? So the moral fabric of our society has disintegrated completely. So which means that there is something fundamental that we have lost as society,
we've lost the soul of society. So if that is the case, there is something fundamental that we need to start doing. That is why Dr. Greener was even speaking about basic education, because this has to start now from that level, ground up, so that we can then say, now that we have this crisis, maybe ethics must be taught from early childhood development level, right up to university, so that whatever career we are pursuing, you are also going to be trained at that level. Because we have a crisis now as a country. We need to acknowledge that. So the training part is supposed then to be part and parcel of our own programs. So these are things that we need to start thinking about in a policy space. You know, we have our own senior officials here, you know, DDGs. You know, you need to think seriously about what does it mean, you know, at a policy level. Because we simply cannot afford not to do that. Because before we know it, there will be nothing left in society. So from the side of the Public Service Commission, we've started something new now to say, we are going to be training every public servant just on professional ethics, so that they can begin to have an appreciation of what it is all about. That when they are there working on those resources, they must remember that they are stewards of those resources. They don't belong to them. They are stewards because they are there on behalf of society. And the joke part of it is that society is not even aware of their presence there. So it is up to them to have that level of consciousness. So that's why we need to train them. So if we do that, then at universities we must do the same. Because these are young people who've been produced by our society that has lost this moral authority in any event. So you know what's going on in schools and so on and so forth. So I don't need to tell you about that. So we have a role to play, but universities have an advantage of curriculum development. So you can actually look at the extent to which you can begin then to see the extent to which this work can feature in all our programs across the board. I mean, currently I'm working with the Engineering Council to say that why do we have a situation where, for instance, at this day and age, engineers are accused of, you know, a poor workmanship. But then you find, if you look fairly closely, it's because they've been hired, but they've not done the work. They've hired other people, you know, this subcontracting business, because of other problems where people are demanding work. So you get a job, they come to you, they threaten you to say that you shall give me this percentage, or else you don't operate around here. So those are conversations which are hard that we're supposed to have, to say that if then I'm prepared to sacrifice that, what am I delivering in society? So if then I have this ethical grounding, I can stand up and say, I would rather not do the work, instead of giving it to you, knowing fully well that you're not qualified to do it. So these are kinds of things that we need to own up to, because that's the kind of reality that we are confronting. So then the second part on the role, you know, of higher education vis-a-vis the challenges, you know, that we'll be confronting from labor, from students, and so on. That is why I was talking about that it's important for us in these conversations to also have the leadership of universities. I'm glad that we have vice chancellors and DVCs and so on, because what is important in this instance is that we need to remember that, by the way, when we provide this leadership at these institutions, we do have organized labor. We can't wish them away. They have their own views, they have their own interests. We do have students and student leaders. They have their own views, they have their own interests, and so on. What is our role then when we lead? Our role is to help them to understand what our vision and mission is, so that wherever they are, they must know what we are up to, so that whatever interests that they have, you then try to help them to shape those interests around what is the core business. What is your core business? What are you there to achieve? So you have to rally around that together. But the problem that we have is that it becomes very difficult to communicate that message. You know, we are not trained to communicate. So you find that what I understand, my next door neighbor doesn't understand. They think that, well, I'm the craziest person that has ever crossed the face of the earth, right? Because they don't have a sense about what is it I'm trying to pursue. So you need communicators who understand how to communicate. So universities, I just want to urge you, look for people who can communicate. To communicate a message such that even your opponent must rally around you. Have you ever seen a situation where even a union leader can sing to protect you because they realize that what you are actually driving is far more important than what they had actually thought about. So, but if we have not communicated the message, they'll be very dismissive. So these are kinds of questions that we are struggling to achieve because communication is very complex. So we are consistently accused when we lead to say that, no, we are selling out because we've crossed the floor. You know, leaders are always viewed with suspicion. Can you imagine, immediately when you get appointed, even when you are head of department, they say, hey, this one is, you must look after this one. You know, they are dangerous. They are now accounting to management. So management is seen as an external party, you know. So management does not actually have to be viewed in that fashion. They must be viewed as part and parcel of what we are achieving. So the reality is, it's a reconfigured role that I'm assuming. But I'm not losing sight of my role as a scholar. So first and foremost, I'm here as a scholar. Secondly, I'm now getting appointed to lead this particular department. So you are a professor. You have your own views. You are a fighter. I mean, some of them actually can even stand up in Senate to show you that they're not interested in listening to you. How do you say to them that, no, listen to me now, you can sit down because we are buddies? But how is that person understanding that now we are buddies, I can sit down? So it's a way in which I communicate my message. So these things are very complex. So then the situation that I find myself in is to manage that equilibrium so that they don't run amok and say, no, we're not part of that institution. Those people are crazy. I don't know what they're driving. You know, it's like even questions, you know, of the appointment of women in universities. You know, many people actually think that it's something that we must theorize. You can't theorize about it. You must understand what it means. We are talking as a constitutional value about a society that excluded women, right? We are a patriarchal society. So if you have to address that, it means that the lens that you use is that when you do appointments, first and foremost, you are looking for females, right? So if you don't succeed, you must account for that. But people don't even think about it. They appoint, they don't even have to see the reason why they should go and account. Because you must account why you had failed, so that you can put and set a process in motion that guarantees that next time you should not fail. You see, so anything that you do, you must account. That's why we say what we have introduced is accountability that goes hand in hand with your responsiveness.
Well
so you
said.
do your work, but also account, so that you know that I don't account to myself. I account to the very same scholars who are with me here. I account to my very same peers. And I account to the very same unions and the very same student leaders. You see, once you've understood that, you'll find that things then begin to work in a smoother fashion. So that's how we need to start working on these ones, Prof.
Thank you. Well said, Prof. And I think we in the room appreciate Prof's wisdom and experience. And we really appreciate that. We've run out of our time for further questions, but I'm going to allow Dr. Green, if you have any final words that you want to say before we conclude the session. Okay, he's fine. Colleagues, we're not taking any questions. We just want to follow our time schedule, but we do have a interval break coming up, a tea break, so you can interact with our speakers. We also want to appreciate our speakers. We have lovely gift bags here, and I'm going to ask Mandisa to. I'm going to ask Salvation to please hand them over to our guests. Thank you, Prof. Green. Dr. Green. Thank you very much. And we really enjoyed that session. Colleagues, before we break for tea, you know, you always see lovely pictures on the screen. So we want to be part of those pictures in the future. So we're going to take a group photo and we're going to do it on the stage here. So if you can make your way to the front, taller people at the back, and then shorter ones in front of them, and then a row below the steps, and quickly. It's infringing on your tea break. Okay, colleagues, please come up as quickly as possible. And also, please tuck yourself in so that we can have enough space.
Thank you so
You can
much.
find me as UK.
Okay. Lovely.
Or Evelyn will tell you.
Oh,
Or Tia
yes.
will tell you. They're going to be like, yeah, you're so proud. I'm glad they come on the air conditioning. And what about Apostle? You probably know her too. But she's more like ICS.
Oh,
She's more
I didn't see it. Okay.
No, it's been a good colloquium.
Yeah, no, it has. It has.
So how are you doing, Mr. Photographer?
I'm trying. How are you?
How are you? Never told me. How are you?
How are you?
What about you?
I'm trying.
Oh, you're doing well.
I'm doing well.
You're doing well.
In terms of,
I see you popping.
in terms of work.
Well,
okay, yeah. In terms of
But
work, I'm doing
otherwise,
well.
otherwise you're still doing.
Prof,
okay. Yeah.
How are you? All right, so you okay? Thank you so much for the presentation. We didn't have time.
I don't want to lie
I think
to
both
myself.
on graduate employability.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's got its own complexities.
yes.
That's what I said. We must talk.
We must talk. Thank you, Prof.
important to do. Mr. Chabalala, last night, of course, it was not over a bottle of wine at the gala dinner. You said something that, about the seed and the soil. So if our universities are a fertile soil for development, knowledge, scholarship, and intellectual growth, then the support that the department is providing represent that very same seed of investment, enabling us as universities to yield meaningful and lasting impact. The success, ladies and gentlemen, of this particular program lies in the symbiotic, I must add, partnership between the national leadership and the institutional leadership as far as the higher education sector is concerned. Mandisa, if you allow me to call you on a first name basis, because we have been together from last year preparing this particular colloquium, is that you said something about through partnerships, ideas are nurtured, collaboration take root, initiatives grow into programs that strengthen the teaching, learning, research, and to a certain extent, community engagement, expanding our capacity as institution across the sector, and in particular, enhancing success of our students at the various institutions of higher learning. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 days, we have gathered to reflect on the UCDP grant, particularly the university-led one, how the projects are handled, what is there on the market in terms of the success of this particular project as far as strengthening our education sector is concerned. But it is worth noting, and I think it is worth noting, perhaps something that not everyone may be fully appreciative of or aware of, that this gathering marks a significant milestone in terms of our higher education sector. Why? This is the first national colloquium on that particular level of the university-led colloquium collaborative project under UCDP, convened by the department. I think we must write clap for that, because then this is inaugural in a sense, and also appreciate the role played by University of Limpopo, of course, and also other universities, because it was not only UL that was part of the team in terms of making this inaugural day become a success. I was entrusted to reflect on the proceedings of today. Of course, I must say, Professor Rush, you will pardon me, I may be really repeating some of the one or two things that you said yesterday, but it is just to connect the 2 days, because then we'll be on our way out. When you look at day one, I'll just say from 4 to 5, even 10, important insights and issues came up, were discussed, and continued even today in terms of, one, is that collaboration must be intentional and sustained. Effective partnership, ladies and gentlemen, not emerge by chance. They do not emerge by chance. They require commitment, coordination, trust, and long-term engagement. Second, institutions must share knowledge, practice, and lesson learned more systematically. It must not be because it was accidental that we get to know what the other institution is doing. Thirdly, there was a strong call to strengthen and expand communities of practice that transcend individual institutions and projects. Ladies and gentlemen, these networks, they tend to serve important platforms as far as learning, innovation, research, and collective problem solving is concerned. Fourth, there was this strong sense that there is a need for a framework for the implementation of the department's capacity building project, meaning that now capacity building must be framework based. But then let's transition to today, as far as today was concerned. Today was a day where we sort of deepen the conversation around UCDP, the work of the department, and incidental matters, as we have basically witnessed during our plenary session. Discussions today, ladies and gentlemen, they challenge how we consider collaborations, initiatives, partnerships, and basically also looking at this, responding at this from emerging policy priorities, development priorities, and thinking of evolving challenges facing the sector at the current moment, and to start thinking differently, critically, and also acting differently. There was an open floor engagement that took place. And then the open floor engagement that took place, I'm not going to be saying a lot from it, but then what was very clear is that there was a build-up from the cafe conversation of yesterday. There was a shift from focusing really on reflecting as to what has been happening, to basically saying, what do we need to do? What can we bring to the table in terms of what are those priority areas that we think we must consider, notwithstanding the current call that is out, as Professor Singh said. There was, ladies and gentlemen, from the floor, that's what I have seen at least, there was an awareness that there are different programs or projects. There was Eddie, there was Helm, perhaps there was also Maria, part of this particular project. That was said, because there's Eddie. Where is there's Eddie? It must be Maria. So, also priority areas, and I'm not going to mention all of them, that came out of the open floor discussion. Disruptive technologies, student support and succession planning, indigenous knowledge system, ethics and morality, integrity, entrepreneurial mindset, and the reality that degrees alone do not guarantee employment. And as a result, we need to move away from creating a nanny state as it were in South Africa currently. But then, let me say, on a cautionary note, there was also something interesting, whereby it was said, the so-called previously disadvantaged institutions, they tend to be more research-focused instead of more innovative research-focused. Then I said, okay, perhaps it is said. But then also the understanding of innovation, in my view, is relative. Perhaps I'm saying this because I'm from what people might say it's an HDI, but then we are not. We have seen our Dubai yesterday on the screen. We are a different university compared to what you know the past 50 years. So I was just saying it is a good observation, but then we also need to look at it from a particular context. Then we go to the plenary, which in my view was also a central highlight of the day, delivered eloquently by Dr. Green. I only knew Dr. Green by just coming in, and I saw this gentleman wearing a green shirt. I said, no, this should be Dr. Green. But I told him, I'm not skinnering. I told him, I said, no, because you are wearing green, you must be Dr. Green. And Professor Amanda Makanya, also my former boss, you know, they explored several thought-provoking and mind-pricking issues. And then out of their messages, I'm just going to highlight, because then I'm just reflecting. One was that despite abundance of resources and opportunities available to us and to our communities, we continue to face significant challenges. Among them, growing unemployment, corruption, to name but a few. And there was a question asked, how does the UCDP help us to address these challenges in the current changing world? Dr. Green argued that the UCDP must function not only as a funding mechanism, but also as a driver of transformation and also a catalyst for policy change. A challenging question, Mandisa, I'm going to direct perhaps to the department as a flow from what Dr. Green was saying. Are you, as a department, satisfied with continuing to allocate funds to institutions where there is no meaningful change and transformation remain limited? Are you comfortable with that? A further question would be, are you prepared to leverage the UCDP grant giving more strategically to support a differentiated higher education system? Because that's what was said during the plenary. So this will be the questions. There was also a discussion around artificial intelligence as part of our reality. We cannot wish it away. We cannot think it away. We just need to know, as leaders of the academic environment, how to deal with it. And then going further, there was also the question of alignment with national priorities. This was highlighted in different ways, and sometimes overt, covert, subtle, but then it was highlighted. University initiatives, ladies and gentlemen, must contribute meaningfully to the broader societal goals. Policy frameworks, even those that were highlighted by Dr. Green, must guide the development of a higher education sector in a manner that really takes the context of that particular sector. Professor Makanya, of course, is not here at the moment. Further reminded us that now the importance of engaging ordinary citizens and communities in terms of the partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, many of the insights we overlook, as he said, exist within the knowledge, the reach, and the ability ecosystems of our communities. Communities should not, therefore, be seen just merely by universities, really, as objects or subjects of our research. They are co-creators of knowledge. They are basically owners of knowledge. And perhaps maybe that is why the issue of community engagement is not one of the key issues with the UCDP, because we tend to approach communities when we do community engagement as if really they are just the subject where to get information, and that is the wrong way of going about it. I'm about to conclude my 20 minutes. Don't worry. No, I'm about to conclude. It was also recognized that universities must continue to work diligently in addressing all the challenges. Of course, it is not always that as universities, what you do is appreciated, is acknowledged, but then we are here because it is part of our calling to impart knowledge. To paraphrase what Professor Mandla said, and I'm just paraphrasing, without leadership that truly understands and responds to the challenges facing the sector, meaningful progress will remain difficult to achieve. Of course, we must be asking ourselves, do we have the leadership at our different institutions that are hell-bent in terms of putting their heads in the sand like the proverbial ostrich? If that's the case, of course, he is right. Nothing it is going to change. Of course, there are critical questions that you can ask that have been asked, and I'm just going to quickly run over them as part of the reflection. How do projects move beyond short-term interventions toward a systematic transformation in teaching, learning, and research innovation? What mechanisms ensure that capacity development through UCDP initiatives continues even after the end of the funding cycle? How does collaboration generate new knowledge and practices that individual institutions could not achieve alone? And how do we do our initiative to address structural barriers affecting our students, our student success, rather than focusing only on individual student deficit? And lastly, are our academic leadership, as I've said, aware and appreciative of the challenges we face, or they are just hell-bent in putting their heads into the sand like that particular ostrich? There were, of course, key themes over the 2 days. As I'm going to conclude, as I'm about to step back and reflecting on those key themes in terms of what we have been doing. First is that collaboration, it is not optional. It is fundamental to transformation and fundamental to the makeup of the UCDP project. Secondly, student success remains the central purpose of all institutional development initiatives. Third, meaningful and sustainable change requires a strong leadership and institutional commitment. Fourth, the development of teaching and learning initiatives must be informed by research, evidence, and scholarly practice. And finally, the so-called historically disadvantaged institutions are not objects of partnerships just to get funding with the so-called historically advantaged institutions. They are equal partners. Program Director, distinguished colleagues and partners, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to say as I conclude then, years from now, the success of this particular program will not be remembered for the meetings that we held, for the inaugural sittings that we had, but for the institutions we strengthened, the partnerships that we built, and the generations of students whose futures we changed because we chose to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you know he's earned his title as academic and political analyst, right? So we want to thank him as well. Prof. Sibanda?
Am I getting my present?
Yes, you are.
I'm waiting.
That was a very well, a good representation, an excellent representation of our 2 days together. And you can publish it too.
Okay. As long as you are not going on to TikTok, ne? Stomach in.
Thank you, Prof. Sibanda. Let's give him another round of applause, please. Colleagues, we are on the last item on our agenda, and that is the closing remarks. And for this, we have our Chief Director for Teaching and Learning and Research Development at DHET. Last night he was called Philip. Today I'm going to say Mr. P. Shabalala. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. And I will do the scripted closing remarks so that I do not veer off and be tempted to, do the summary and recap, which Professor Sibanda did so well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. As we draw the curtains on this inaugural university-led collaborative project, Colloquium, I'm filled with a profound sense of optimism for the future of our post-school education and training sector. Over the past 2 days, this gathering has transformed from a simple meeting of minds into a vibrant ecosystem of ideas. Our primary objective here was not merely to present papers, make presentations, check boxes, but to reimagine how we work together in the spirit of collaboration. We set out to achieve some specific goals, and I'm confident that we've achieved them. In that we've seen evidence that when universities lead with purpose, they can bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and societal impact. By bringing together universities and the challenge that was put through to us today in terms of whether universities can become higher education colleges, bringing along industry partners, we've started to dismantle the walls between academic inquiry and practical application. We've heard that most complex challenges, whether in the green economy, climate change, health, social justice, transformation, etc., cannot be solved in isolation. They require collaborations and not solo acts. So to all the speakers, institutions, teams, and everyone that has shared their experiences of the collaborative projects, we want to thank you for your transparency. You've shown us both your successes and your struggles. And in doing so, you've provided a roadmap for those who will follow. To our partners, thank you for grounding our discussions in reality. Your presence here signals that you are ready to invest in the talent that we produce and the research we generate. I must remind us that as a colloquium, it is not only a spark, but this fire that it sparks must burn at our institutions. I'm therefore looking ahead with great expectation that what we discussed over these past 2 days, we will be able to take forward. First, we must move from ad hoc projects to systemic integration, as many of the speakers have indicated here. The department will be working to identify the policy levers needed to ensure that these collaborative models become the norm and not the exception. We need to look at how funding frameworks can better support multi-institutional and multi-sectoral proposals. We must commit to data and documentation, and let's not lose the insights gained here. I urge each university to document your partnership models so that we can create a shared digital repository of these collaboration blueprints. And then we can share them so that we can learn from the successes of one university to the other. Finally, we must sustain the momentum in that in the shorter period to the medium term, the department will reconvene not just to talk, but to measure tangible impact of the partnerships that we have on student success and community development. And as I conclude, the theme of this colloquium was collaboration. Let us remember that the Latin word for collaborate, it actually basically means labor together. And so we must commit to making sure that we can labor together. The labor is still ahead of us, but today and yesterday we've proven that we are ready to do it together. Thank you for your commitment, your intellect, and your passion for transforming higher education in South Africa. And before I step off the podium, I'd like to acknowledge and appreciate the planning committee that put together this colloquium, as well as everyone that was involved in the preparations to this very successful inaugural colloquium. And in the planning committee, I'd like to single out the following colleagues. Umem Mandisa Chakwe from the Department of Higher Education and Training, together with Usli, not my child, disowned me here. And then Shiba Diketani from the University of Limpopo, still colleague. And Professor Sibanda from the University of Limpopo, Professor Sue McKenna from Rhodes University in absentia, Dr. Gumede from MUT in absentia as well, and Abigail, where are you? Oh, yes, there she is. And thank you so much. And otherwise, I would like to call all the officials and members of the organizing committee, that were running around. I can't see properly. My glasses today, I don't know what happened, but it's not the 1 o'clock crew of this morning. I'd like to call to the stage just for us to appreciate the organizing committee of this colloquium, ladies and gentlemen. Abigail and Tim, Sal, and others, where are they? They are outside. Please come. And also the communications team from the department. I'm hoping that UMEM will get, a photo gallery of the proceedings and this colloquium, so that it can be properly recorded. Please come quickly. Yes. Yeah, and so thank you very much for, yes, you're welcome, quickly. Well, the proverbial silver and gold I don't have. but I can thank you, and thank you very much for the work that you have put and making sure that everything went so smoothly. Thank you very much. Please give them a round of applause. Yes. And I really want to wish all of you safe journey and safe travels back home. God bless. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much, Chief Director. We have come to the end of our program. The plane has now landed. Now you need to take your Airlink and Safair flights. However, before you do so, lunch is served at the same venue as yesterday. I think it's called Cloverleaf, just outside on your right-hand side. So enjoy, and thank you so much for being with us for today. And all the best, and drive safe home, those of you who are driving. Thank you. Bye.